PCN sites have gone ahead, I think from a community pharmacy perspective, we'll be one of the first in the country, which is absolutely incredible. So we know that the pandemic continues to cause millions of infections and millions of deaths across the world. And I guess the reason for the vaccines were vitally important. And those with a role in delivering the COVID-19 vaccination program need to be knowledgeable, confident, and competent in order to promote confidence in the vaccination program. Now, the reason why we've organized daily meetings, half-an-hour meetings, is so that you are confident, you're knowledgeable, and you're competent enough by the end of it to be ready on day one, whether that is the 11th or the 18th. Now, just to give you guys a bit of an idea, it seems to me that there is a likelihood that the hub site, which is the one in Redditch, could potentially go live on the 11th, although that is unlikely. There is a potential from the email that was sent to me today that we could potentially be going live on the 11th. The other two sites, I'm 99% confident that it will be the 18th week commencing that they will be going live. So going over to the reason for the national protocol. So you'll probably notice on some of the material that I've sent across, there's a PGD, there's a PSD, and what we'll be following is a national protocol. However, there is a PGD also available. The protocol allows us a bit of flexibility within the different vaccine delivery methods. It also allows the use of technicians for various areas, whether it's a vaccine administration or vaccine preparation, whereas that doesn't necessarily, it's not fully covered in the PGD. Now, the other thing is, in terms of the, it may be, so one of the areas is that there could be various stages where we could make use of the protocol. And the way I read it is there could potentially be various areas that we could also be using the PGD, but there needs to be a bit more clarity in there. There is a local enhanced service document, which basically details the terms of agreement. Now, I will be going into that in a bit more detail in the next few days, but initially what I want you guys to do is familiarize yourselves with the two vaccines. I think that's and also understand the training material that's required and the SOPs. So today's session is about familiarizing yourselves with what the two vaccines are, and then starting on that process of training. And by the end of it, you'll be confident, competent, and knowledgeable, and you'll be ready to go. Okay, so in terms of the indemnity arrangements, the state indemnity arrangement for clinical negligence indemnity arrangements have been provided until March the 31st, 2021. That could potentially be extended depending on the national need, and most likely will be. So that basically covers us for the clinical areas of the vaccination program. You are still covered by the non-clinical vaccination activity with the new mark insurance that we have. So the strategy is to basically to tackle firstly the residents in care homes, etc., and then over 80s, over 75s, over 70s, over 65s, etc., etc. It's really important that we're connecting with our PCN network and understanding what the requirements are. From my understanding, the PCN networks will be tackling the care homes, etc., allowing us to focus on the other risk areas. So just a bit of background around vaccines and how they work. Now, this will be covered by the ELFH material, but essentially, there's lots of information around, mRNA, etc. And the reality is it still follows the same method around the fact that what we're doing here is we are potentially putting the inactivated or the weakened form of the vaccine, and in this case, we're putting the mRNA copy, and we're allowing the immune system to basically recognize and develop antibodies and T cells. So going over to the Pfizer vaccine, the Pfizer vaccine uses mRNA. One of the things that I looked up in the Pfizer vaccine, and a lot of things have been kind of said about it, is the Pfizer vaccine does not contain any animal material, etc. So in the ingredients. There was a lot said about in the various websites around the Pfizer vaccine, and that's not the case. It doesn't contain any animal material. The way it works is it contains a genetic sequence mRNA for the spike protein, which is found on the surface of the virus, wrapped in a lipid envelope to enable it to be transported to the cells of the body. The lipid envelope is so important. And we'll go into the little bits around the fact that if we shake, and the reason why we can't shake the vial is because actually of the risk of opening up that lipid envelope. When injected, the mRNA is taken up by the host cell, which then translates the genetic information and produces the spike proteins. These are then displayed on the surface of the cell, and the rest of the process takes place where the T cells are activated and the immune response then takes place. Now, in this case, you haven't got a whole or a live virus involved. In this case, it's the mRNA. So the vaccine cannot cause disease. The mRNA naturally just degrades after a few days. So you can see here a picture of exactly how it works. And that's why there's a long-term storage and stability issues, and also the fact around the lipid covering of the mRNA. And that's really, really important, and it makes it very fragile, which is why it can't be shaken. And there's been various cases in PCNs where they've had to basically, they've received a delivery for some odd reason, that box has been shaken, or it's basically fallen to the floor, etc., and you couldn't recover any of it, and that was really damaging. So you have to be very, very careful when handling the Pfizer vaccine. So the vaccine pack contains 195 vials. Now, various colleagues will be involved in prep, but various colleagues will be involved in vaccine administration. Now, you may have already had your rota set, but the reality is that could very, very quickly change depending on the needs on the day, etc. So if you have been set on prep and you assume that you're not going to be having to worry about vaccination, or vice versa, that you really need to kind of ensure that you understand both areas and you understand them well. And the SOPs will cover a lot of this, but just to give you guys a brief overview of exactly what will be required so that you're kind of aware. So when you remove it, obviously from the freezer, the undiluted vaccine can then be stored for 5 days, 2 to 8 degrees, and that includes obviously the transport time to us. So that's why we've been given 3.5 days to vaccinate our patients. The vaccine is contained in a multi-dose clear glass vial. The vial has like a rubber stopper you might have seen when you were kind of duping some or destroying some vials. You'll probably see these kind of vials. And there's an aluminium seal which just flips off. So each vial contains 0.45 mils of the vaccine. You then have to dilute it with 1.8 mils of sodium chloride. And the sodium chloride usually comes in 2 ml vials, those long plastic ones you may have seen. But once diluted, it's reconstituted, and you can supply up to 6 times. I have been speaking to various PCN colleagues, and they are managing to actually get the 6th dose. It requires a lot of intricacy, but practice makes perfect. So initially they did find that difficult, but after a while they did manage to get the 6th dose. After withdrawing 5 full 0.3 ml doses from the vial, like I say, it may be possible to get that 6th dose. Now, where you can't get 0.3 mils dose, then the content should then be discarded. So I did talk about the 2 mil normal saline, and each ampule basically contains 1.8 mils. The remainder is obviously discarded. There are no storage requirements, special storage requirements. It can just be left at ambient temperature, and many of you have sodium chloride ampules just in your dispensaries. So when you receive, so some of you will be vaccine receivers. So when you get that, you'll get the diluent, you'll get the syringes, you'll also get the needles, you'll also get vaccination record cards and patient information leaflets, etc., etc. The stuff that's not been mentioned here is the swabs, etc., which will arrive separately via what we call a selected inventory list. I'm not going to go into that in too much detail right now. I'll touch on that in another session. Okay, so a single dose once reconstituted, is 0.3 mils to the patient. Yeah. And there was an initial requirement to have the first dose of 0.3 mils, and then a second one 21 days afterwards. That now has changed to 12 weeks. So the latest guidance is that they have the first dose, and then 12 weeks later, they're booked in for their second dose. That doesn't necessarily mean we're only doing 2 sessions. So we're doing a lot more than that in our sites, depending on the needs of the NHS and of the local community and PCN area. So this doesn't necessarily mean it's just 2 sessions. It means that there's a lot of sessions. We're playing the long game here. Right. Okay, so going on to just the refrigeration requirement. So we talked about the fact that once it's taken out of the freezer, you've got 120 hours where it can be kept to 2 to 8 degrees. Now, when it gets taken out of the fridge, so when you basically starting to prepare it for dilution, it's really important that you be very careful around that, because actually when you take the vial out, it can only remain an additional 2 hours at temperatures up to 25 degrees C. The vaccine pack will have a yellow label on the front stating the time it was removed from the freezer. So you'll have exactly the date and time, and you have to do various recordings on charts, and that will basically be covered in another session. Also, it's all partly covered in your SOPs, which are on the shared file.
Sorry, Mo, just to interject there, and for clarification for everybody. So we won't be handling frozen vaccine. That is something that is done by the wholesalers. So it's them that actually remove it from a freezer, and it starts the thawing process on its way to us.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for that, Pete. Just jump in wherever you feel the need to, because I may miss bits here and there. So thank you very much. There's also the issue around the 6 hours. So once you basically diluted it, you've got then 6 hours to be able to use that vaccine. Okay, so in terms of the equipment that's required for reconstitution, again, that will be covered fully in your SOPs, but just to give you guys a flavor of that, you obviously need the multi-dose vial, which will have 0.45 mils of the vaccine in it, and then you've got your 1.8 mils of sodium chloride. You'll have your alcohol swab, you'll have your needle, you'll have your syringe, and all of that will be supplied to you. And it says there at the bottom, the reconstituted vaccine can be stored between 2 to 25 degrees, but must be used within 6 hours following dilution. Okay, so the procedure for reconstituting, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but because that will again be covered by the SOPs. But the one main thing to ensure is that we're not shaking. There is a technique to actually inverting the vial 10 times. So you don't shake, you invert the vial 10 times. And there is a technique to that, which we'll show you practically in one of the evening sessions. So again, this presentation is available and will be posted to the shared file, and it talks through the technique around how to actually reconstitute and administer. I'm not going to go into that detail right now. I think initially I just want to give you a bit of an idea and a bit of a flavor as to what the vaccines are about. Now, the other issues around air bubbles. Now, we had a different strategy for flu vaccines. With this one here, any air bubbles should be removed before removing the needle from the vial. One of the things to bear in mind is that there is also a technique in that, because the last thing you want to do is shake the vial. So you have to be very careful that if you are removing air bubbles, you're not shaking that vial. So again, there's a technique in that, and one of the PCN pharmacists will hopefully join me in a session, and we'll go through that. Okay, there's an issue with also ensuring that, and you a lot of you have already gained this experience around the fact that you shouldn't be resheathing under any circumstances, and it's the same process. So when you're disposing of the needles, again, needle syringes and used vials and ampoules should be disposed of immediately. The yellow sharps bin should be sealed with when it's 2/3 full. Follow the standard protocol that's on the SOP. And you've got a visual there, which basically shows you how a gentle invert is. And many people, and like I say, the PCN pharmacists will be actually giving you a practical demonstration of that. Okay, now, you will have seen that there's a folder called training log. Now, I'm going to share that at the end with you, but that's also got in it a competency assessment tool. So there's two areas. There's one where basically there's a training log, which is the all the training that you need to do with ELFH, and the second thing is the competency assessment. Now, in each of the sites, there is a lead person that should be collecting all of that information, and then that will filter through down through to the two superintendents, myself and Pete. So what should happen is once you've done all of your training, you give that to your lead pharmacist in that site, the clinical lead in that site. So for Hub, it's myself. For Oakwood, it's Amrit. And for M&M, I believe it's Eleanor Kibble, but Pete will have it in the end anyway. So I think, Pete, do you want to collate all of them on the M&M side? Yeah, perfect. So I'll go into the training log in a bit more detail. But before I do that, I just need to quickly just give you guys a bit of an idea around the AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, the locally enhanced service agreement covers both the Pfizer vaccine as well as the AstraZeneca vaccine. The likelihood is that the AstraZeneca vaccine is the one that we'll be administering. However, it's not necessarily the case, and I'm led to believe that with the Hub team, your first delivery is likely to be the Pfizer vaccine. So in terms of the vaccine composition, you've got the details there, but the important thing to note here is it doesn't actually contain a preservative. There is a slight difference, which I'll go through, but actually there's a big difference, and you'll really enjoy the AstraZeneca vaccine. Number one, it doesn't have those regulatory requirements around the -70 degrees, which actually helps community pharmacy a huge amount. But it does look very similar. So basically, they're 4 ml vials and 5 ml vials, and they come in 80 dose packs or 100 dose packs. Now, the majority of the vaccine will be supplied as the 8 doses per vial, which is the 4 ml vials. And vaccinators must check how many doses of vial they are using contained so that the vaccine is not wasted. So upon delivery, as you would do with your flu jabs, you would put it in your fridge between 2 to 8 degrees. Now, again, there's the issue to ensuring that it's kept upright and away from direct sunlight to prevent prolonged light exposure. Once the vial bundle is punctured, the vaccine must be used as soon as possible within 6 hours. So you've still got that 6-hour rule. And as the vaccine does not contain a preservative, any unused vaccine must be discarded if not used within this 6-hour period. So the 6-hour period is the same with the AstraZeneca vaccine as it is with the Pfizer vaccine. A single dose is 0.5 mils. So if you've got 5 ml vial, then you're going to be able to get 10 doses out of it. And if you've got a 4 ml vial, you're going to be able to get 8 doses out of it. So again, there is potentially that 12-week from the first vaccination to the second vaccination. So whilst there was a minimum of 28-day interval, that's actually been extended for 12 weeks for the AstraZeneca vaccine as well. moving on to the preparation of the vaccine, and this is a bit you guys will really enjoy because it's so much more simpler. So before drawing up the dose of the vaccine, obviously you'd be following the general process with cleaning hands and using alcohol-based gel, etc. Each multi-dose vial should be clearly labeled with the date and the time. Do not use the vaccine if at the time of the puncture was more than 6 hours previously. And check that check the appearance of the vaccine. It should be colorless to slightly brown, clear to slightly opaque, and free of any particles. Again, do not shake the vial. And then it's a case of withdrawing 0.5 mils, and any air bubbles should be removed, and go ahead and vaccinate. So really, really easy, and there's no requirement for sodium chloride, etc. The disposal process, again, there isn't any real difference from the other one, so it's just continuing as normal. So the next few sessions will also talk about the booking system, and there will be one session particularly dedicated to the national booking system. I have actually now got access to the national booking system, and I'm playing around with it myself, and then I'll show you guys in the next few days how that works and how we can actually ensure that we're live with the clinics, etc. There will be a separate session for all the stewards that will go through exactly how the booking system also works. But it's important that all the leads, the vaccinators, etc., are aware of how the booking system works. There will also be a separate session for clinical pharma outcomes. Again, I've been sent the login details for that today. So I will be able to share that with you guys too. So really important in terms of your readiness now to focus on some key areas. Firstly, the national protocol, the local enhanced service agreement. Both of those documents are in the shared file, and ensure that the SOPs are read and signed. Complete all areas of the training matrix. So in terms of the training matrix, let's see if I can bring it up. I hope you guys can see this.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic, thank you. So that's the SOPs relating to the Pfizer vaccine. The AstraZeneca vaccine I'm currently working on, but there's quite a bit of reading to do in the Pfizer vaccine SOP, and the AstraZeneca vaccine will be with you hopefully within the next 2 days. And then going on to the training record. Okay, so just touching on some key areas. So it's important that you understand the SOPs and are able to basically sign them off. At this stage, you'll only be signing off the Pfizer, but hopefully by Friday, you would have signed off the AstraZeneca as well. You would have read through the local enhanced service. You would have read through the clinical negligence scheme, and you would have completed the the additional SOPs in relation to managing needle stick injury, washing hands technique, and anaphylaxis, which are all actually part of your standard SOPs. So they would have been there. Now, there is a PowerPoint presentation from Public Health England, which has also been put in there, which goes into a bit more detail around the whole vaccination program. And there's some guidance from the Department of Health, which I have also put in there. Basic life support training. So what you would have to do is go onto flujabtraining.co.uk using the link provided, and that will get you onto basic life support training. There is a refresher course for, I think it's £19.99. So what you do is, if you can, make that payment and then claim it back on expenses. If you are having issues with payment, etc., and you want me to sort it out for you, I can do that too. So if you can, just give me a call and we can do that, because I think it had PayPal on it. So some people may not have PayPal accounts, etc. But I think there is a guest function on PayPal too. So have a look at that. And then you've got the ELS training.
Sorry, just interject there. So, The with regards to the basic life support and anaphylaxis, so if you are somebody who has attended a vaccination face-to-face training course in the last 12 months, that will have been included in that. So for many of our technicians who've trained this year, that's a step you don't need to do. This is primarily for our experienced pharmacist vaccinators who were exempt from having to do face-to-face training this year because of COVID. So the requirement is that you have done basic life support and anaphylaxis within the last 12 months. So that's the key difference there.
Yes, brilliant. Yeah, thank you so much for that, Peter. Very important point. So basic life support would have to be done within the last 12 months, as Pete has mentioned, and therefore you need to make sure that gets done. But some of you, even down south, would have had your training this year already. And then you've got the ELFH. Various training. Now, it says here, vaccine administration aseptic training has been completed practically. Now, that was put in actually from the West Midlands team. So what that means is you just need to be observed. Those requirements aren't necessarily the case up north, as far as I'm aware. As long as the superintendent feels that you're competent enough to be able to follow aseptic procedure, they can sign you off on that. And then understanding the Green Book and having gone through the competency assessment tool, which is in a separate document. So that should all be there. And then you'd be signed off. You'd be signed off by your supervising pharmacist and the superintendent. If you are already a supervising pharmacist, it will be the superintendent that will sign you off. Okay. Right, let me just jump back on. Okay, brilliant. So I guess the floor is open now just for questions on this initial session. I just wanted to do it half an hour so that we basically have time for a few questions. So you can unmute yourself or you can ask on the chat, and myself and Peter here as well to answer any questions.
Mo, can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Mo, what is the Green Book, please?
So the Green Book goes through vaccination technique, etc., and also contraindications, reactions. It's basically the guide for vaccination technique, isn't it, Pete?
Yeah, so it's a government document, and it covers all vaccinations that can be done. So there's a specific section on COVID that has been introduced to the Green Book Guide. It used to be a printed document, but now is purely available online, and you can access each individual section accordingly.
Any other questions, guys? Wow, no questions at all. Okay, fantastic. Okay, guys. Well, conscious of time, it's coming up to 7:30 now. So I'm very grateful for you guys attending. So the training, like I say, has been stated for you guys. It's all available on that shared file. Has anyone not been able to access the shared file? Okay, great. Yeah, because that was on the link that was sent. So if you guys access that, we've got until Friday to get the training done. If we can aim to get all the training done by Friday, we'd be in a very, very good position.